Hello guys, welcome back. On the screen I have the code we did the last time in the previous video. So now we're actually going to continue. As I've explained in the previous video, that now we are actually going to do our Mongoose. We're going to set up our database and we're actually going to do our models, right? So let me give you a bit of description of the project that we are actually building, so you can be able to visualize it, how our database is gonna look like, right? So we are basically building a job posting application or project, right? So a recruiter or a hiring manager basically goes to our application and registers as a company and start posting jobs under that particular company, right? And also a this could be a hiring manager or it could be a recruiter, right? So a recruiter could possibly be hiring or advertising jobs for multiple companies. So we're actually going to allow any registered user to have multiple companies under their account. So think about it. The recruiter, the name is John. John registers on the company and John is recruiting for Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, right? So this means John will have to register also those companies, those three companies, and John will be able to start posting jobs under each individual company. So John will decide, okay, there's a job at YouTube, so now I'm posting a job under YouTube, right? So we're basically going to have the admin or the user. We're going to have a company, and a company has jobs. So you can already think about the relationships these models will have. A user can have multiple companies, right? And then a company could have multiple would have multiple jobs, right? Because a company doesn't really advertise one job at a time. We could have like 5 openings, or it could be more than that, right? So we're going to have a user, a company, and a job model. So that's what we are actually going to do in this video. So let me quickly create user, and we have company, we also have a job, right? Job.ts. So I would like us to start with the user, but before we actually start with doing our models, we need to install Mongoose, right? Let's open up our terminal here and install. So basically Mongoose will help us with modeling our database, right? So this is basically helping us to ensure that we basically have a representation of what our database is gonna look like, right? So let's give it a few minutes and it should be done. Now that we have it installed here, let me close the terminal. Let's start with the user. What do we need in the user, right? So let me import the stuff we need from Mongoose. We need the schema. How do you write it? Schema from Mongoose, and we'll use this Mongoose schema constructor to construct the representation of user, or a representation of these models: user, company, and jobs, right? So we're going to have something like user schema, cost schema, and in here we can basically start constructing what this schema will look like. So a user will have to have a name, which should be of type string. Which will be of type string, and required is this attribute or this property required upon registration or upon adding data on the database. Yes, we require the name, the email is required to true. And we can also have like something like this, so that whenever there is no email that is inserted, right, we could throw an error message and say user email is required But since we're going to have a validation library, we don't really need to do this. We can just say true here. And then one other thing that I would like us to do, right? I would like us to define the representation of the schema using an interface first. Something like interface user. So we're going to have a name, which is gonna be a string, email, string, password, string, active is the user active, and it's going to be a boolean, right? And then using this interface, we can come here. This constructor takes an enforce dog type here. We could give it the user here, and it will basically know that what we need so far. You see, it knows we have password and the active property here, right? So we can extend the definitions here and say they are required. Is it required? And this is going to be true. And type is also going to be what? Boolean. But then this one takes a constructor like this. What else? The password is a string, and also it's required true. And we're also going to have the timestamp property here, which will basically, upon adding a user on our database, it will basically, this timestamp, basically what it does is it creates two properties: created at and updated at. So this property will hold the information, like, or the date when this user was added on our database, and then the updated at will basically have the information about when was the last time this particular user updated the information here. It could be the name, email, active, or password. So whenever there is a change here, or there's an update in these four properties, this updated at property will say the last update was at this date, blah blah blah. And then the created ad will basically have the information of the user when they added, it was added on the database, right? And also, to be able to use, we need something here. We need a model function which will basically allow us, and then we're gonna need to export it here. Export user equals to model. It basically takes in something like this, and then here's the name of the document, or where these users will reside in the database, right? It could be, think about it more like the name of the table, right? Or the name of a container that will have the information of the users that get registered on our system, right? So this is basically going to be users, and then the representation in this users table or collection, right, is going to be what? It's going to be a user schema, right? And then what I also like to do is, why there's something wrong here, can't find name now. What I would also like to do is actually to take this interface here and put it in here and say, let's have a types file here. So we're going to have everything to do with files, and export and paste it here. And then in order to use the iUser interface, we're going to come in here and import it. Import iUser from, go in utils and types. So it should be fine. Basically what we did in here, we're going to do the same thing with the company and the job, right? So let's do the company. So as you've already seen in the user schema here, we needed the schema, and then we also needed the model function, which are from Mongoose. And let's also have our type in here for company. Export the interface company. So for company, we're going to need the name of the company, which is going to be a string, location. And then for location, I would like us to do something like this: interface. We're going to embed an object in this here. So the location will have a country, right, which is going to be a string, and the city. So this is basically where this company is based, and then a city is also going to be a string. So the type of location is going to be of location. And what else we have? Company size, which is a number. Contacts, or let's say email. Actually, let's just have email, and it's a string. Email, the description, or the about. Actually, let's call it the about of this company, right? What you guys are all about, and maybe also have the website of this company. And this company has to belong to a certain recruiter or a hiring manager, right? So we need to reference the user, and then we're going to say the type of this user ID is going to be any, because the user type of this will be of Mongoose object.id, right? So object ID. So let's just call it any for now. And then we can go back to our company in here and say constant company schema and company. Same thing we did in the user, right? So what do we have? Let me do the location. So the location is another object. So we are embedding or nesting an object, right? So we're going to have location schema here. Do the same thing. Location, and then we're going to have country. Remember, we have a country. Is of type string. Is it required? Yes, it is. And we have a city, right? Type string. Is it required? No, we don't really need to know, because some companies don't actually have like physical offices, so we wouldn't really have the city. But then we would need to know where this company is based, like the country, right? So we have this. So by default, the required is gonna be false. So we can just require to say false, and then here type is going to be of location schema required true. So basically we have nested an object here. And then what else do we have? We have name, name is required, company size, type, number required true. What else do we have? We have the about, I think. Type string required. Yes, we need to know. We have the email, type string required to and what else? Website is a type string. I would assume that every company that wants to advertise a job have a website, so I'm going to say it's true. And we have the user ID here. The type of the user, we could say it's any, but we could use the types object from Mongoose here and say the type of the user is going to be of types dot object ID. And is it required? Yes. So whenever a company gets registered, we need to know which user it belongs to, and we are saying this user ID this user ID references a user that is in users, right, in the users collection, right? So we're going to say this ID here, it could be 123 blah blah blah. This ID of the user belongs to a user in another collection, so we'll be able to fetch this particular user with this user ID. So yeah, this is basically it. So we are referencing it. So sort of think about it more. If you have worked with relation database, think about the reference as more like a foreign key, right? So yeah, this is it. And we're also going to have the timestamp here. Timestamps, we're going to say true, and export constant companies equals to model I company, and it's going to be in companies collection, and we're using a company schema. Yes, this is what we have. Let's save. So now we are left with the job, right? Yeah, we, and then also you must be mindful that we haven't really connected this with a database, right? We are just modeling our database so far, and then in the next part after this, I'm going to demonstrate how to register on MongoDB and actually have a database on the cloud. So for here, we're going to do schema, model, and types, because this job will actually have to reference a company, right? And then this is from Mongoose. So again, we are coming in here. Okay, let me say this is it for company model, user model, job model. So we're exporting the interface iJob. So what is it about the job that we need to know, right? So we need to know, or the title of the job, right? Web developer, software engineer, or whatever. So it's going to be the title of the job. We need to know the description about the job, sort of like the requirements, right? So everything that we need to know about the job. So this is also going to be a string. The type of the job, so we're going to have types here. I need us to have a type for job types. We're going to say we want to have a junior, could be a junior, it could be an intermediate, and we could have a senior here, or we could also have an entry level here. So we're going to say a value that gets added on this type, it should be any of these four. It should be from these four, and if it's not, then we're actually going to have an error. So the type of this job should be from here, And then what else? We also have a salary, right? A salary, we want to have another object here. So we're going to say I salary. So we're gonna have the minimum or mean. Let's just say the minimum because we want the range, right? The salary range, or actually, yeah, salary range, I salary range. And then the minimum is going to be of number, max is going to be a number, and then we're going to say this is of I type. Okay, salary range. And what else we need to know about the link? Here's the thing again, we're not actually going to allow users to apply the job on our platform. So we will require whoever is posting the job to provide a link where the user who is interested in this job, or someone who's interested in this job, can click and go apply there. So sort of like you can provide a Google Forms link, right? Once you provide the Google Forms link, once the user is interested in applying for this job, once they say click apply, we're going to take them to that link. So it could be your own website, or it could be Google Forms, it could be something else, right? Or it could be also LinkedIn. So this is the link that we need we need you to provide, or we need the recruiter to provide, so that the applicants can be able to apply for the job. And then this is also a string. We still need a few things. We need the opening date. So when is this job actually open to take applications, and then the closing date, and then obviously this is top of type date. We need, I think I did something wrong here. This should be the job type. So this is actually seniority, right? Seniority types, right? And then the job type actually should be job types should be office. Is this an office job? Is this a remote job? Or it could be these two combined. So we're just going to say it's a hybrid, right? And then we're going to take these job types and put it here, and then here for seniority, right, we're going to take this one. So we have this so far. Great. What else do we need? We need the company ID. It's going to be of type any. So yeah, I think this is should be enough for us to do the company or the job schema here. Types, and did we have any object that is embedded in here? Okay, let's start with it. We have the salary, constant salary schema. So we need the recruiter to specify the amount of the salary, between the minimum they are offering and also the maximum, right? So it's a salary. We don't want that thing of recruiter saying it's a competitive salary. No, we need to know how much the salary is. We don't need to know if it's competitive or what. Salary range, and we're going to use it here. So the minimum is of type number, and it's required, and the max is also required. So for salary, we're going to use the salary schema. Okay, they say the I salary has no export. So far so good. So what I'm basically going to do now, because as you have already seen what we are basically doing, I'm just going to skip to a part where I've already filled all these parts here, or all these properties for job, right? So we can make this video a bit shorter. Okay, basically I'm done here. So what do we have? We have the salary range is required, and then it's of, since we are embedding an object or nesting an object, so it's going to be of salary schema, and then we need the minimum salary they are offering, the maximum they can offer, the closing date, and then the opening date obviously is also this. And then we can say by default, if they don't provide it, we're going to say dot now. So we would assume the opening date is actually at the time they are posting this job, right? So we're going to have a default value here. And then the required the company ID is basically the ID is required, and it's referencing a company that is in the company's collection, right? And then we have a description of the job, the link to apply. And then remember in here, in the types, we said the seniority, we had these values, right? If you look at these values are a string, right? These values are strings, right? So this means seniority and type, they will be of type string, but then we need it's going to be of type string, but we are anticipating to be these values, right? So it is going to be a string, but we are anticipating that the values that are getting provided should be from these ones here. And then what else do we have? And then we also have the title of the job, and then the timestamp. And yeah, this is basically what we have so far. So now what I need us to do is to what register a company, not register a company, to set up our account on MongoDB Atlas, so we can be able to connect our project with our database that is on the cloud, right? That's on cloud, yeah. So yeah, let's head to Chrome and actually register an account. So now we are on mongodb.com. You need to go ahead and let's say the products. Let's see what's going on. We need to register an account for Atlas. Let's try it for free, and you can sign up using what? You can sign up using Google. So I'm just going to hit that and sign up using Google. So you need to have like a Google account to be able to use this option, and I'm going to create using this account. Accept. So you need to have to answer this question. We are building a new application. What type of application are you building? What are we building? Let's see, what can we say we are building? Content management. What language is our preferred choice? So we're gonna choose JavaScript here and finish. And then now we are actually here, right? So obviously we are not going to use any of these. We want the free tier, right? And we're going to create they say now we need to create a cluster, and then obviously we're going to choose the free ones, right? And I don't think we actually going to do anything here. We can also change the cluster here, but it's okay. Just hit cluster and create cluster. So this is basically where our database is going to reside, right? So for security reasons, right, you need to create a username to be able to access everything under this cluster, right? So or actually what they say, create a database user. So this user will be able to access the database. I mean, not the database, to actually access the databases. Yes, this user will be able to create to access the databases in here. So I'm going to create one here, create technology, and the password, I'm actually going to create mine. Create user, success. Please keep your credentials to connect to your cluster. So we have created a user, right? And then where would you like to connect from my local environment. And then that means you need to what, to add your current IP address, the current IP address of your computer or your machine, so that they will be able to allow you to access it. And then it did add my IP address, so it means we can go ahead and finish, and we can go to databases. And now that it's done, I need us to say browse collections, right? I need us to go create a database that will be interacting with before I actually show you how to connect. So let's say browse collections, and we don't have any data, or we don't have any database, right? Let's add our own data. And then what's the name of our database? So we can call it TadJobs, TadJobs and underscore app or DB. So this is the name of our database, and then it needs a collection name. So at least when you create this database, you should at least have one collection, right? So the name of the collection, we're gonna have the users, and then we create, and then now we have our database TadJobs DB, and then we already have a collection called user. And then whenever we try to add a company or register a company, this will basically create a database for us called companies, and it's gonna start adding information in there. And then also when we start adding jobs, it's gonna create a collection of jobs and start adding the information in there, or start adding data in there. So now we have our database TadJobs underscore DB, and then we have users. What I need us to do is, let's go back here and then see how we actually going to connect with this database. Connect, and then we're going to say connect your application, and then you can see here we have the collection. You can see we have the collection, what I mean, the connection string, right? But then this is for the cluster. I need us to so I'm just going to copy this, right? I'm going to copy this, and we go back to our thing. We go back to Visual Code, right? VS Code. So we are back here, right? And then remember, we have copied that connection string. I need us to create a .env file here, and then we're gonna say db URI, and we give it this, right? And remember, they say we must replace this with the password. And what I need us to do is actually remove this part here, and then in here I want us to specify the name of the database that we are actually trying to interact with, TadJobs underscore DB. This is the name of the database, right, at the end of the string that we copied. And then in here I'm simply going to put in my password, right? So okay, now that I have I've managed to put in the name of not the name, I managed to type in my password. So now we can go ahead and use the connection string that we put in here to connect to our database, right? So in a database here, you're gonna say db.ts, and then we're going to use a function from Mongoose called connect, which will connect with our database. And we're going to export this function because we're gonna use it in the index file, so that we connect with we connect with our database. So I need us to use a try catch here. What I'm gonna do is use this function connect, and you can see it returns void, so it's not a asynchronous function. And then in order for me to use the DBI URI that I put in here, I need us to install something that will actually allow us to read the data from the .env file. So env install.env. So this will basically allow us to read any data that we put in here, right? Now that we are done, and then we can simply do import.env env from .env and env.config. So this function, we just call it here, and we'll be able to read the information from our .env file. What's the problem? No. And then it says this function accepts a string argument of type string and is not assignable. So this value here could be an undefined or it could be a string. So let's say a string and a callback function which takes in an error here. Sorry. We can have a function here. If error, we can either use the error handler that we implemented and say app error and say 500 something terrible happened. So this means we couldn't connect to our database, right? And then if there is no error, we could simply say we are connected to the database. And in the catch function, we can throw another one. Throw. Yes, so we have a function called connectDB, and it basically what connects our DB. Let's go into index, and I'm simply going to call the connectDB function in here. Did it import it? Yeah, it did. So yeah, what should we do now? What we can do now is simply run our project, right? npm run dev. So we should be able to see our TadJobs server is running, and in here we are connected to the database, so we should be able to see those console logs. And once we see them, it means we can open up our browser and see. Actually, let's see okay, we are connected, right? So it means so far we have connected our database. So now let's start sending the information to our database, right? With the index file, and in here we can delete this. Say new user, users dot create. There is a function. Wait, let me import the users first. Import users, okay, and create. So we are creating a new document, right, or a new user, and it should be able to tell us the values that it is expecting, right? Let me do this. It needs from us, so it needs active, email, name, and password. So name, is going to be technology email tad@gmail.com, password 123 active. We should be having a boolean which should be true. And okay, we have an error here because we using the await without the async key here, and we can send back this information here. Say data is new user. So let's save this. Okay, now it's connected, and let's go to Chrome, open up localhost and see what's going on. And boom, we have data here which contains the name, email, active. This is the values that we provided, and then by default we need to be able to uniquely identify each document in our database, so it gets assigned an ID. And then also these properties are created or generated because we had the timestamp true. So the created at, it will show you when this user was created, and then the last updated. So the last updated here will now it contains the info the data it actually contains the date when this data was added, so it means it hasn't been updated. So once we update it, this information here or this date here will actually change. So we can open up our database here, refresh. We should be able to see this data here, and boom, 1 of 1, we have this already. So we are now able to connect and send data to our database, right? So if we run this again, it should be able to add another document, and 1 of 2. So it means we, for every request, because in our Visual Studio, I mean in the code we said if you go to this route here, you're basically going to send data to the database, right? So that's basically it. We have managed to connect with our database, and you can see it's actually running when you are sending information or you're sending data to the database, right? And there are a bunch of other functions that we can get, we can play around. Let's see. So now that we have used the create, we can also use constant db users and say await users dot find, and we actually, this function will return every database, I mean not every database, not every user. There is no problem here, it's clowning. Let's save it. We are connected back here, and let's call this, we should be getting an array. We see we are getting an array of all the users, right? So yeah, this is the end of this video.